last week I was actually in the army. I'd just gotten back from an exercise, and I'll talk about that in another story, the last exercise called Diamond Dollar,
Okay.
where I went up to far north Queensland. There's quite a few stories I remember from that, because that was the longest exercise I was ever on. And yeah, some very weird shit went on there. That was like 6 weeks in the bush, and a lot of it was by myself.
Cool.
as it turned out. But anyway, it was crazy that I even went on that exercise, as I'll explain at the time. But because it was just before I was due to be discharged at the end of my 3 years, they'd already tried to, do their normal thing with everyone who was coming up to the end of their term and that they'd signed for. The normal thing was obviously, to try to convince you to sign on again, re-sign and stay in the army rather than leave. So because morale had been so low for so long, they were down to the bones of their arse in terms of numbers. They were really down on numbers, so they really were concerned about not only recruiting people deceitfully if need be, as in my case, but also hanging on to people when it came time for them to re-sign. But I think my attitude and sort of satisfaction with life in the army was fairly well known, or should I say my dissatisfaction, especially to the people I worked with. So the staff sergeant, who wasn't a bad bloke actually, he was a bit more casual than some of the other arseholes in my unit. It was his job, to do the pep talk and get me to sign on again. This was probably 6 or 8 weeks out, or more perhaps, from when I was due to finish. Yeah, probably more, probably about 3 months. And he didn't try that hard, because I just said, mate, I basically just cut him off and said, there's no way. I might not have used that, not exact accent, but I just said, mate, no, forget about it. There's nothing you can say or do to get me to re-sign and spend any more time in the army. I hate it. So let's just dispense pleasantries or words to that effect.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, yeah, so he kind of, put in a few moments of a brave effort to say that he did his job well, but then he realised it was a lost cause. So that was that. I was getting out 10th of December 1987, and anyway, this big massive exercise was coming up called Diamond Dollar, and they did it every year or every second year or something in those days. We've been running for a while and ran for some time after it, and they do it these days, or they call it something different, but it's a big one. It involves all of the services, all of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and they join in with forces from other countries too. I think the Americans and Singapore and a few other maybe New Zealanders, whatever, getting involved. Anyway, so it goes on for about 3 months, this thing, from start to finish.
The New Zealander, the one.
The New Zealander, he comes over. And sort of different, it's a great big staged sort of war games, I suppose you call it. And you do your bit in it. So it doesn't mean you're there for the whole time. Some sort of units and whatnot are there much longer than others doing things. But anyway, our part in it was about 6 or 7 weeks as an artillery unit. And, that was coming up, looming on the horizon. And I said, I probably to this staff sergeant, was the first person I might have spoken to about it. I said, well, the last thing I wanted to do, believe me, in the world was go on that fucking thing, to do that after the last 3 years of going out in the bush all the time. It wasn't fun, believe me.
Mm.
I'll talk more about that when I get into the stories of that. But you're pretty much awake 20 hours out of 24 and working your guts out in extreme conditions all the time. But anyway, last thing I want to do was go on that last thing. And clearly when I brought it up, no one had even thought about it. I said, hey, I'm getting out on the 10th and, I'm not due to get back because we had our timetable or something. I'll be told I'm not going to be back to mid-December from that exercise. Gee, it's just typical, no prick had thought of anything. So I brought that up a good long time before, and no one could give me any good explanation or decision about what was going to happen, whether I was going to go or not, and sort of I kept agitating that I couldn't go and I wouldn't go, and why would I go? You got to spend money training me when I'm walking out the door the moment I get back. I came up with any fucking excuse or argument to try and sway their decision making to my favour. But of course, in the end, it just came down to practicality, no doubt. And these wankers, like if I stepped out of my job, I was the ambulance driver when it came to field exercises. There was no one else because I was down to minimum manning. There was just no one else to take my place. So regardless of anything else, any other reality or practicality or what I was due to do or when in terms of getting out of the army, they just said, well, fuck it, you're going on the exercise. Of course, they didn't tell me this. I'll confirm this to the last minute, typically. Poor management, leadership and decision-making was rife in the army, I can tell you, at that time in that unit, and I suspect more broadly, and it probably hasn't changed much. But but anyway, it was particularly bad, there's no doubt about it. Terribly administered place to work, that unit. And they say a peacetime army, it becomes sort of weak and facile and bogged down in its own bullshit. And I think that's really very much what was going on at that time, 10 years after, any sort of real conflict they had been involved in, and before they got involved in other things that Australian Army's been involved in since then, those mid-80s. But anyway, it was very much a peacetime army, and it was. I digressed from my original story, son, as that I was going to tell you about the very last thing that happened after I'd got back from that exercise, and
Please
there was another hilarious story, and I'll tell you about that another time of having to get back early enough to get discharged from that last exercise. I had to get flown back rather than drive back, which is what I would normally always do because I was a driver and that was my fucking main job. Other than driving around whilst there on exercise, you drive to and from it with all the bullshit, hooked up to the back, loaded on the top, and driving in convoy,
Yeah.
To and from these exercise areas. And this was a massively long drive from Enoggera in Brisbane because it was in far north Queensland, right up the northern part of the peninsula we're coming from, Cape York Peninsula. So it was about, I don't know, it's about 1,600 kilometres to Cairns, I think, from Brisbane, 1,600 or 1,700. And it was about another 1,000 kilometres north of that. So that's how far away we were. And we're in these very slow-moving army vehicles and convoys. So it was 5 full days' drive to get to the exercise area. And there would have been at least that to get back. So as that would have put me after my discharge date, believe it or not, had I driven back and taken all that time. And this is only after me haranguing them repeatedly about this situation, different people in my unit saying, well, I can't fucking do it. I'm going to get back after my discharge date. What are you going to do about that? I say, I'm not donating days of my life to the army and not getting paid for it and suffering this bullshit. You can forget that. So anyway, they eventually arranged for me to fly back from the exercise area on one of the, the army transports, Air Force transports that were going backwards and forwards from there in Brisbane and whatever, which is what I did do. So I got back in time to spend the last 5 days or so in where you normally go when you're in the last week before leaving the army. You go to something called DSU. What was it called? Divisional something unit. anyway, it was an area where they just did all your sort of basically your admin, your discharge admin.
Yeah.
And you were just put into a holding area, and you basically, to keep you busy, you were just given shit jobs and duties and stuff to do while you sort of get it all signed off. You've got to go to the dentist and the doctor and get checked out and make sure they're discharging you, so there's no legal comeback later. You know, they sign off on you that you're all fit and healthy when you discharge, etc., etc. So you get all these final checks done, hand in equipment, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you go through all this bullshit with a handful of other people going through it too on the base, from different people you don't know, from different units and whatever. And my discharge day was a Monday, I think. That was the last fucking day. And it was on the Friday before that day. And I'd been down in the space of a few days doing their duties, and it was they've got another one of these little corporals like you've got to put up with it in the basic training, like I talked about before. He's in charge of this discharge unit, you see, giving you these shitty little jobs to do. No one else would have had to do it. If you had any rank, you wouldn't have had to have done any of this. But as I didn't, you just get treated like shit, just to remind you of, that, this is how we treat people in the army. just before you go, don't forget, this is how it goes here.
Tell everyone what a great time you had at the army.
Yeah, this is how it starts and ends, and everything in between is as distasteful as possible. Anyway, so yeah, we're sort of 6 or 7 of us are lined up there, for final fucking roll call on the Friday afternoon before the weekend, and I'm getting discharged on the following Monday. And this arsehole goes, "Oh, we need someone to work in the mess on the weekend." And then he just fucking says, "You can do it." He just points to me. And I said, "Mate, I'm getting discharged on Monday, and you're waiting until the last second before you walk off at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon and telling me now I'm going to work all weekend." I said, no. I just no. I said, just no. I just can't do that.
No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. 3 years I've put up with this shit, and you put this on me at the last second on the last weekend. I just couldn't fucking believe it. I did have plans for the weekend, but I exaggerated it and said, look, I had a hotel booking or something I'd already paid for, and I couldn't, I wasn't going to get a refund, yada yada, so I gave him a story to put more pressure on him. I picked someone else. But he put it back on me, this prick, because he obviously probably gets this sort of story quite a bit, being where he is. But down to his shit organisation too, no doubt, to some extent, that he did this at the very last second. He said to me, he put it back on me and said, look, if you can find somewhere else to do it, I don't mind, so long as someone turns up there. But if no one does, it's on me.
Yeah.
He's told me I've got to do it. So I go, oh, fuck that. There's this other guy there who'd been in this discharge unit for a lot longer than normal. Most people were there for a week or so, and for some reason, a typical army bungle, administrative bungle, this guy had sort of hung around for longer. Probably because he got there for a long time. I don't know, whatever the case was, but he'd been there for a while. He was a bit nuts and pretty pissed off, and I just said, I'll give this guy a go. Because he was saying, oh, I give a fuck what I do anymore, I don't care if I'm here or not. He stayed on the base, and he did, it was a bit of a case, it seemed. I said, mate, would you mind doing this for me? So I put the hard word on him. I don't know if I had much to offer by way of trade, doing something for him as I was out on Monday. But anyway, miraculously, I got him to agree to do it. I don't think he had anything planned, by the sounds of it, for the weekend. So I was able to get out of that I couldn't deal with it, could not deal with it. I know it was putting it on this guy, but I don't think this guy this is a different situation. I think he was getting out of the army early or something was his situation.
Right.
But I just thought so much shit I'd put up with in the army up to that point. It was too much of a final insult and a finger up your fucking nose sort of thing to have to put up with that sort of thing at the last second. Because like I said, working in the mess was like a 5 a.m. get up and you wouldn't finish till about 7 or 8 p.m. It was pretty arduous stuff. So that instead of a weekend, and of course you don't get paid any different, doesn't matter how much you work or not in the army, the pay was still the same. You did 0 hours a week or 80 hours a week. So that I always remember that as just being a typical little sort of potted experience to take away from the army. That sort of was reflective of the whole 3 years, Not getting told anything to the last minute, just getting treated with disrespect and disregard, and having people with tiny amounts of authority over you act like they were your god, and then being rude to you all the time, just unnecessarily, and just act like a fucking grown up, I mean, not everyone was like this, like I said, but there were so many like it that it was really dismaying. You could barely get through a day. It would be rare to get through a day without coming across people like this in the army, just in the normal part of the job. Just act like a grown-up human being rather than exercising your piss-weak little amount of authority, and carrying on like an arsehole, So there it is. I got it sort of played out for me in those last couple of days.
Yeah, a microcosm.
And it felt so good driving out that gate of the army base for the last time, mate, knowing this is fucking it. I'm done with this shit.
Time for the next load.
Yeah, it wasn't the same gate, obviously, because the first gate was the recruit training sort of base down in Wagga, and I finished up in Brisbane. No, that's where my posting was, and I stayed at the same unit for that time at Nogra in Brisbane. One Field was the name, was the sort of short name for the unit. It was First Field Royal Artillery is what it was called. Fuck, I forgot now. Royal Australian Artillery. Royal Australian Royal Australian Artillery. Yeah, it was Royal Australian Artillery. Yeah. Yeah, RAA. First Field Regiment. Royal Australian Artillery. There it is, something in a nutshell. Got it.
You got it.
Got it, yeah.
Well, there we
go. Yes, I do. Okay, so that'll do for now. That's about over an hour. But yes, as I speak, of course, I can remember many other things keep popping up in my head.
Will you jot them down for me on a notepad and bring them up next time?
I won't need to, son, because as soon as I talk, I'll just keep remembering them.
Okay.
I'll have to tell you about the incidents when we went on later in our recruit training, when we went on our little few days of field exercise with our teaching us bushcraft and combat training. There's and the way they treated the guy in our platoon who volunteered not, who was volunteered to be a prisoner, and this is how we deal with prisoners in the field. So there's that story. That's a ripper. There's the Christmas time one. There was no one around at the base because everyone had fucked off. When we'd arrived, one had gone for Christmas already. So that's why there were so few people around. And there was only one other platoon who'd come in 2 weeks before us who stayed on the base over Christmas. Yeah, so it was all pretty weird. But there was the incident in the hallway at Christmas time, and the tearing up of the Christmas cards. That was
That sounds like a good one.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
That's a good
And
one
there's
in time for Christmas as well.
yeah, and there's another one where one of the guys in the platoon attacked a fellow platoon member with a knife.
Oh, the gangster. Yeah, I remember
He
that one.
threw his bayonet across the hallway from one room to the other through the doorways. There was that one. We ended up with marching out with something like 38 from the original 50 that started for one reason and another. 3 months later, yeah, we lost at least 12 people from the platoon. Yeah, so there's all those good ones. Lots of good stuff in the training phase, the recruit training, and then all the other weird shit that happened after that. That final exercise, I can tell you a few good ones about that too. How
Diamond Dollar.
I ended up by myself. And all the medical staff from the ambulance. I was driving the ambulance and they'd all gone. Yeah, there were 3 medical staff, so there were 4 of us, including me to begin with. And after about 3-4 weeks, it was just me left for one reason or another. They busted the doctor for self-medicating.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was a morphine addict. Yeah, so he kind of looked like Sherlock Holmes too.
I see.
Who was reputedly one, but anyway, yeah, I tell you all those, they're all good ones.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good, Dad. I'm looking forward to it.